The Carolina Hurricanes kicked off their yearly early season West Coast road trip this weekend, and it was a tale of two games. And we will dive into the games against the Kings and the Ducks in this episode of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Caniacs. I'm your host, Jared Ellis, and you're listening to Locked On Hurricanes on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen of this Monday morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And today's episode is brought to you by the folks over at Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Now, again, the Carolina Hurricanes, they're in the middle of their early season West Coast road trip that they do every year whenever the North Carolina State Fair is in town, because it is right by PNC Arena and traffic gets really freaking hectic over there. So they just take their West Coast road trip early in the season, and now it is that time. And they started it off against LA and then last night against Anaheim. And we learned a lot over these two games, and we're going to dive into those. This is going to be something we start to do every Monday when the Hurricanes have games over the weekends. We're going to do this on Monday, what we learned over the weekend, and we're going to start out with that. And first up is that Tony DeAngelo is a defensive liability. Like, it's bad. In every game, in all three games they have played this year so far, he has really made some mistakes that have led to goals for the opposition. We saw a lot last night in Anaheim, and this is really showing that he needs to be the seventh defenseman and not Jalen Chatfield. He's a traffic cone out there. He's just making so many mistakes, and now this time he doesn't have Jacob Slavin to cover up those mistakes. He's not going to be a first pairing defenseman this time around with Jacob Slavin. He's not. He's going to be a third pairing defenseman, whether he's playing with Brady Shea, Dmitry Orlov, Jalen Chatfield, whatever. He's not going to have Jacob Slavin next to him, covering up mistakes. And one thing I did see yesterday, following the game against LA, kind of leading up to the game against Anaheim, was a quote from John Tortorella. Back, I believe it was beginning of last year, kind of whenever he was coming into Philly. I want to read this, because it really it says a lot, about his defensive game. And quote, last team he played for, Carolina, I think they could absorb some of that with the roster as far as maybe some of his deficiencies defensively. It kind of sticks out more with us. I think he's done some great things for us here. It's just we want to try to help him, and we feel he needs to get better defensively without taking away any of that great offensive ability he has. We know what Tony is. I'm a little bit not disappointed, but the defensive liability is something we need to work at. I didn't think the amount of work that we need to do with him. I didn't think that at the point in time that we got him, but it is what it is, end quote. And it's the same thing this year. Like, there is a lot of work that needs to be done with his defensive game. He's not going to be able to hide behind Jacob Slavin this year. He has got to improve defensively. I think in the next game against San Jose, I think he's coming out of the lineup and Jalen Chatfield is slotting back in. He never should have came out of the lineup. And we talk about, we've talked a lot about this off season, heading into the regular season, just how many defensemen they had and what they would do. And I think they definitely made the wrong decision over these first few games, but hopefully things can improve. Again, in San Jose, I think they're going to sit DeAngelo and put Chatfield in the lineup. I think that's what they need to do, and I they have seriously got to work with him defensively if they're going to want to really contend this year, because you have a team like Anaheim, a team that's not expected to be good this year. They're still very, very young. They go up 3-0 on you in the first. They beat you 6-3. Like, you can't be doing that. Again, I know I've said this in years past. All teams in the NHL are NHL teams. They all have talent there, and anything can happen on any given night. But man, this isn't ideal. They're really going to have to work with him big time. And there is also, more off-season rust to knock off. That's another thing that we have learned. Again, kind of something we expect from every team, regardless of the sport at the beginning of the season. There's definitely some rust to be knocked off. I think, we definitely saw it, with Freddie Anderson, saw it a lot with Antti Ranta. Again, the team in front of him didn't play that great. So, you know, you know, maybe that, definitely a factor there because he can't do it all. But there's definitely some more rust they got to knock off, and that'll come off with time. We all know that, but it's definitely pretty evident. But in a more positive light, things we learned over the weekend is that Teuvo Teravainen's actually shooting the puck, and he had 3 goals over the weekend. Is tied for second in the league in goals. He has 4 on the season right now and 0 assists, which is crazy to think about. But I'm here for it. I think this is something that he really needed to do. One, to kind of bounce back from a pretty disappointing year last year. It's also a contract year for him. We talked a lot about over the offseason of, is he a guy that could potentially get traded? And right now, I think that's going to be the tail of the tape this season, is he's really going to go out and prove himself. Like, hey, I still got it in me, re-sign me, or if, whatever, it's going to enter free agency, have, other teams be like, okay, he still has something left in him, because he's been in the league for a long time. He has been. But the fact that he's actually doing this is great, and I absolutely love it. Shorthanded goals, they're on fire for the Hurricanes this year. Sebastian Aho in the game against LA, he took the all-time franchise lead in shorthanded goals, which is absolutely fantastic. And he's still obviously super young, and still has a whole career ahead of him, so he's going to continue to add to that total, and that's great, and I love that. There are things to like on this team right now. They're still going to be a very good team this year, but there's definitely those early season things that they got to get worked out, and we'll see how things end up shaking out as time goes on. They're not going to go 82-0 this year, sadly, but it is what it is, with that game against Anaheim. I think the Hurricanes can really use it as a learning experience, and, really use it as stuff to build off of. I don't believe they're going to be practicing today, but, you sit there, watch the film, be like, hey, again, we talked a lot about Tony DeAngelo and things, that he's doing wrong. Defensively can really be like, hey, watch that tape and be like, hey, you're doing this when we need you to do that. And I think that's going to be really important for them of using that game against Anaheim and LA as well as learning experiences. And we'll continue to dive into these games, what went good, what went bad, right after this quick break, folks. Now, folks, it is the NHL season. It's NFL season right now. And if Sebastian Aho scores a hat trick and the Carolina Hurricanes win a Stanley Cup, it's going to be fantastic this year. And if you want to win 100 times your money, play daily fantasy hockey on the Sleeper app. There are all possible scenarios this season, but to have a chance at winning big, you need to play daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper. As the official daily fantasy hockey app of the Locked On NHL Network, Sleeper is our top choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey. With Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. With studs on the Hurricanes like Sebastian Aho, like Seth Jarvis, like Jacob Slavin, Teuvo Teravainen. He's off to a really hot start this year. And then, of course, guys across the league like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Cale Makar. All you need to do is pick more or less the stats for the stars. Choose stats like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more. And you heard me, Canes fans, 100 times payouts on Sleepers. So start paying attention and get your picks right so you could win big. Use promo code Locked On NHL and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions applied. That's Locked On NHL. See Sleepers terms of use for details. Now, diving back into the games, we're going to start with the LA game. That's the one where the Hurricanes, ended up winning. And a thing with both of these games that I didn't mention in the what we learned over the weekend thing is that they're still getting off to these slow starts, and that's not going to be sustainable. We've seen that in years past. Again, it is early in the season, but they're really going to have to work on that. In the LA game, they really looked really rusty and sloppy, getting out of the gate there in that first period. Again, Tony DeAngelo, defensive liability, led to LA goal. And with that LA game, it did get better as time went on, which was good. And they did end up coming away with the win, which again is great. Martinook, we're going to talk more about him later. He created a lot of chances for that third line, for that Martinook, Stahl, Foss line. And in that first period, really doing all he could. And then again, as the game went on, they really got better. They really dominated that second period. Michael Bunting ended up scoring the first Canes goal. And oh, I am totally looking at the wrong. Oh man, I'm totally looking at the wrong schedule there. But again, in that LA game, the Hurricanes, um, again, just more of oh man. But that LA game, it was definitely one where the Hurricanes, they really need to work on holding leads. That was the game where they ended up blowing a 3-0 lead, I believe. Yes, you had Brent Burns, Sebastian Aho, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi all notched goals in the first period, which was fantastic. And again, like I said, Sebastian Aho ended up taking the franchise record for shorthanded goals, which was awesome. Teuvo Teravainen also had a shorthanded goal in that game as well. He had a phenomenal weekend. And then Brendan Lemieux also notched his first goal as a Carolina Hurricane. And at the time, at the end of the second period, the Hurricanes were up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're up 5-3 at the end of the second period. And then, of course, LA ended up coming back and tying. And that's something that the Hurricanes are going to have to work at, is holding those leads and not taking the foot off the gas. We've seen that in years past where they take their foot off the gas and they stop applying that pressure that got them that lead in the first place. And they can't do that. Again, with all of these criticisms, it is still early in the season. It is still very early. These are things that are going to be worked on over the coming weeks and months. But they have really got to work on getting, you know, tightening up. That was an issue that they had in the Anaheim game as well. They played very, very loose. I believe Jordan Stahl literally called it loosey goosey. We're gonna pull up, the what they had to say about that Anaheim game, but obviously, when it went into extra time, in overtime in LA, and then ended up going to shootout. And Jordan Martinook uh, was the guy who won it for the Hurricanes, which is awesome, which is absolutely awesome. I love that. That was the first time, he's won a game in shootout. It went 9 rounds too in shootout, which was crazy. But he did that, and the Hurricanes came away with the win. But they really have got to work on holding leads. And I think, another thing with this Anaheim game is it was the second half of back to back. It was. That's another thing that does need to be factored in here. Second half of a back to back, right out to in your third game of the season. That's not ideal. But again, you look at just how that game went, that even still, that is not ideal. Again, Ducks going up, 3-0 early on in that game, and really not a whole heck of a lot, to really like about that game, aside from Teuvo Teravainen and him having a really good game and doing all he could to get the Hurricanes the win, because it was, like I said, that was a rough game. And, you know, Tavo's second goal was a power play goal. And that is another positive that we're seeing to start out the year. Whether or not it keeps on throughout the year, is the power play. It's showing life, which is big. And then penalty killing, like I mentioned, they're doing really well in shorthanded goals right now, which is awesome, which is absolutely awesome. And I love that. But they have really, really got to get themselves, on the right track, brush this Anaheim game off, learn from it. Marty Necas, he also scored in that game against Anaheim. His was a power play goal as well, which is, again, fantastic. I love that. Again, power play showing signs of life, and Marty Necas really coming out early in the season to, continue to build off of what he did last year, the career year he had. And I think that if if they're able to continue to build on these positives, then they're going to be okay. They're really just going to have to work at nipping these negatives in the buds. Again, my big negatives, from these: DeAngelo defensively, these slow starts, uh, playing super, super loose, not holding on to leads, getting too comfortable with them. They cannot do that. I mean, yeah, you can't blow a 3-0 lead if you're down 3-0. That's one way to look at it, but again, that's not ideal. Again, bad games are going to happen throughout the season. That's gonna happen. There's gonna be stinkers, for every team in the NHL. There's gonna be stinkers. So again, try not to get too frustrated about this Anaheim game. Again, don't get too frustrated with it. It's the third game of the season. It's the second half of back to back. There's going to be issues. There's going to be things that need to get worked out. But I did want to look at what was said after the game. Rod Brind'amour, he said, quote, "We just dug ourselves too much of a hole. We finally got going and started to look a little better. We crawled back in the game and gave ourselves a chance to tie it, but we didn't do well on the goalie pull. I credit the guys for at least realizing that we weren't going well, and they tried to fight their way back and tried to find their way back into it, which, again, yeah, the things were not going well, and they tried to do something. They tried, but again, like he said, they just dug themselves in too much of a hole, and they can't do that. And I think a big part of that is these slow starts to games. You know, and if it was just this season, I really wouldn't make a big deal of it. I just chalk it up to early season stuff. But this has been a issue for several seasons now. These slow starts, they only play, 2 periods. They don't play the full 60 minutes, and, they struggle, you know, whether it was, getting a win or, coming up short, whatever it may be, can't be doing that. Jordan Stahl, he echoed that. He said, quote, "We played 2 periods tonight and it cost the game. We were a little too loosey goosey again, not really defending well and giving up too many opportunities. They came out strong and bit us early. In this league, it's tough to come back. The boys did a good job battling, but it was our start for sure that needed to be better." And again, they've got to get these starts better. They've got to. They've got to. Because if a team like Anaheim, again, no disrespect to them, if Anaheim is able to take advantage of that and beat you 6-3, what's going to happen when you get to the playoffs? When you're playing Tampa, Toronto, Boston, Florida, some of the heavyweights that could potentially, win a Stanley Cup, coming out of the East, what's going to happen then? They're really going to take advantage, and it's going to get ugly. If you're doing it then. Yeah, you'll be in more of a groove at that point. But again, if Anaheim is able to take advantage of mistakes like this, much better teams are going to do it even worse. So they've really got to get that stuff in check. But we do still have to get to the 3 stars of the weekend, and we will do that right after this quick break, folks. Now, folks, it is that time of the year. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy. And it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Now, getting into the stars of the weekend, I was originally wanting to do it for both game or 3 stars for both games, but again, just that Anaheim game, it was really tough to find a lot of positive there aside from Teuvo Teravainen, and he's the first star of the weekend for me. 3 goals this weekend. Again, 2 in the Ducks games, and I believe 2 of those goals were also power play goals, which is freaking-tastic for Teuvo. I love it, and I really hope he can continue the momentum he is building at the start of this season to just have it translate throughout the rest of the season. Let's what is his career high in goals? Because if he can stay healthy and continue just the momentum that he's having right now, I think that's going to be absolutely fantastic. Again, 3 games played, 4 goals already, 4 points. Again, he hasn't notched an assist yet, which is crazy to think about. But his career high in goals is 23 goals, set back in the 2017-2018 season. Played all 82 games that year. So I fully think he could totally set a career high here in goals and really have a career year. His career high in points also that came in 2018, 2019, when the Hurricanes went back to the playoffs. And that was 76 points there. He had 21 goals, 55 assists, and again 76 points on the year that year. And if he can like I said, if he can continue the momentum that he's building right now, I totally think he could totally have a career year this year. He's definitely going to bounce back, from last year. He played 68 games last year, 12 goals, 25 assists, 37 points. I definitely think, again, he can totally have a career year this year if he continues the momentum he's having right now. And again, Sebastian Aho, he's my second star for the weekend. Again, he took that franchise record of shorthanded goals. I think, that says a lot about him. And he's getting trying to avoid the issue we've seen with him in the past of having really slow starts to the year. Kind of in October and early November, really struggling to get things going. And that hasn't been the case so far this year. He's shown signs of life, and I'm really, really enjoying it. I hope, again, the momentum he's building right now, that can continue. Again, Anaheim game, that sucked. Plain and simple, it sucked. It was not a good game. But let's just put that behind us, watch the tape, learn from it, and let's go into that San Jose game and get another win. And I think Sebastian Aho, he's been around long enough. Like, he's gonna have that drive. He's a leader on this team, and I think he's gonna be a guy that really goes out and tries to set the tone in that San Jose game. And then third star for the weekend, Jordan Martinook. Again, he won it in shootout for the Hurricanes in LA in his first shootout that I believe he's ever been a part of. And then in the ninth round, getting that winning goal, I think that was awesome for him. And really, really coming up big when the team needed him to. He's a guy that last year arguably had a career year, was able to stay healthy, and look at what he was able to do. And I'm really like Teuvo and Aho. I really want him to be able to continue that momentum going into this game against San Jose and the rest of this road trip and the rest of the season. I really want the best for these guys. The talent is there. These first few games, where they've blown leads, haven't looked the best. That's not this team. It's not. So don't freak out. That's not the team. They're going to get better, and they're going to shake this rust off, and they're going to look like the Carolina Hurricanes we expect them to look like. Yes, again, they do need to make some changes. Again, I think Jalen Chatfield, he needs to be in the lineup, and Tony DeAngelo needs to be the extra guy. I think that's going to be big there. I think that will help a lot of defensive issues that they've been having. We'll see if that is done in the San Jose game, but we're just going to have to wait and see there. But there's stuff to like with this team right now, but there's definitely stuff that needs to be worked on. And we're going to continue to dive into that as these games come along. And they're not practicing today, so they're getting that off day, that rest. Again, Anaheim was the second half of a back-to-back to start out the season. So, again, that definitely played a factor there. But we're just going to have to wait and see how this San Jose game goes, what changes they decide to make, whether it be in the lineup, game plan, whatever. We're just going to have to wait and see, and we will talk about those in the next episode, folks. So make sure you're following the show along on social media at LO_Hurricanes, myself at Jared Ellis _96. And, as always, folks, let's go Canes. And with this year, let's cause some chaos.